Hey guys, tonight we begin not with a philosopher or a king, but with something far more dangerous and complicated, dating in the Middle Ages. Because believe it or not, finding love in a time of plagues, dowries, and chaperones was somehow even more awkward than texting someone, "What you doing at 2 a.m.?" From courtly love songs to marriage by livestock negotiation. Medieval romance was less about butterflies and more about land rights. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. So you're standing in a medieval village, or maybe a chilly stone castle, wondering how to find love. Maybe strike up a conversation, compliment someone's hose, ask if they come here often. Nope, that's not how any of this works. If you're in the Middle Ages, dating, in the modern sense, doesn't really exist. You don't flirt, text, or go for long walks to see where it goes. Instead, your parents, or your lord, or your abbot, are already deciding who you'll marry, when, and how many cows it will take to seal the deal. If you're a noble, you've probably been betrothed since before your voice dropped. You and your future spouse might meet for the first time on your wedding day. And yes, that's just as uncomfortable as it sounds. The whole thing is about land, titles, and family alliances. Not compatibility or how good they are at lute solos. If you're a peasant, things are slightly less formal, but only slightly. Your family still has a strong say, and love isn't really part of the discussion. Maybe your parents know a nice girl whose family owns a productive goat. Maybe they admire a boy who can thatch a roof without falling off. Boom, you're courting now. Lucky you. It's not that people in the Middle Ages don't feel romantic. They do. It's just not the priority. The goal is survival, inheritance, and social stability. Falling in love before marriage? That's risky. Falling in love outside of marriage? That's scandalous. Either way, it's frowned upon. Unless you're a character in a tragic poem, in which case, go wild. And yet, you dream. Maybe you write a little verse on a scrap of parchment. Maybe you sneak a glance across the market. Maybe, just maybe, you fall for someone who wasn't pre-approved by your family's livestock appraiser. But for now, you wait, you obey. You try not to fall for the miller's apprentice. Because in this world, love might be the goal of poets, but marriage is the work of parents, priests, and politics. So you think someone's cute. Maybe it's the way they balance a basket of onions on their head. Maybe it's the confident way they beat mud off a rug. Your medieval heart skips a beat, but steady yourself. Because in this world, romance doesn't bloom without a balance sheet. Before you even think about courtship, you better ask, what do I bring to the table? And if your answer is a charming personality, you might want to sit down. If you're a young man, you'll need land or livestock or tools, or a roof that doesn't leak too much. Love letters are nice, but nothing says husband material like 2 healthy oxen and a roof that can survive a mild storm. If your father has already promised the best goat to your brother, well, you might want to consider the priesthood. If you're a young woman, your family needs a dowry. That could be coin, clothing, or a suspiciously generous number of geese. Doesn't matter how witty you are. If your family can't pay up, you're likely to spend a long time perfecting your embroidery alone. Now let's say you actually like someone. Someone who makes your calloused heart flutter. You lock eyes at the well. There's a spark. It's romantic. It's poetic. It's completely irrelevant. Because unless your families are on equal financial footing, you might as well fall in love with a cloud. If you're noble, it gets worse. Your hand in marriage is tied to land, borders, and political favors. You're not just a person, you're a walking treaty. Congratulations. Even peasants aren't safe. Marriage is practical. You don't marry for butterflies. You marry because your pig pen borders someone else's wheat field. You dream of passion. You settle for irrigation rights. And yet, you try. Maybe you offer a small gift, a carved spoon, a handful of berries, or your finest slightly cracked mug. Maybe they smile, maybe they don't. But the truth remains, in medieval dating, economics is the flirting, and love is just a bonus you hope your spouse develops eventually. So let's say you're not a peasant worrying about pigs, or a noble dealing with treaties. Let's say you're a knight. Shiny armor, big horse, questionable poetry skills. What's your love life like? Welcome to the strange and emotionally exhausting world of courtly love. Now this isn't dating, this is performance art. Courtly love was a noble pastime, part flirting, part spiritual suffering, and entirely impractical. You, the brave knight, choose a noble lady, usually one who's already married, and vow to adore her from afar. Not physically, of course. That would ruin everything. No, you're supposed to suffer. Elegantly. You might compose a few tortured verses about her silver laugh, or how her hair burns like the sun, which, in medieval terms, means she has hair and didn't insult your family. You wear her colors at tournaments. You pine. You sigh. You occasionally joust someone just because he glanced at her too long. The lady's role? She's supposed to pretend this is all very flattering while maintaining a level of icy detachment that would terrify a glacier. She may respond with a letter, a token, maybe a ribbon, but mostly she'll just be mysterious and unattainable, which is the entire point. The emotions are high. The actual contact, minimal. At best, you might get a nod from across the hall or a finger brushed against your gauntlet during a feast. Anything more, and suddenly it's not courtly love. It's a scandal, or worse, adultery, and no one wants that. At least not officially. This entire setup worked best when everyone involved agreed it was mostly pretend. It was a way to express longing, devotion, and creative angst, all without disrupting the social order. A medieval venting mechanism, if you will. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Did it involve more poetry than practicality? Constantly. But for a knight stuck between battles and boredom, courtly love gave you something to write about, and someone to write for. Just don't expect a happy ending, or a kiss, or even eye contact. So you've fallen for someone. Great. Now comes the hard part. Expressing that affection in a society where touching someone's hand without a chaperone is basically a declaration of war. Welcome to the medieval solution. Tokens. Think of it as 12th century texting. Slow, confusing, and open to wildly inaccurate interpretation. Let's say you're a knight, and you're hopelessly in love with Lady Marjorie of whatever her last name is. You can't speak to her alone, and your poems keep getting intercepted by her confessor. What do? You send her a glove, or maybe your embroidered sleeve. Nothing says I love you like mailing someone part of your wardrobe. And if you're on the receiving end, congratulations. You now have a sweaty linen sleeve you didn't ask for, and the romantic burden of pretending you know what it means. Is he confessing love? Asking for a favor? Suggesting a duel? Who knows? Women gave tokens too. A ribbon, a piece of hair, a tiny pendant. It was sentimental, sure, but also deeply strategic. Give the wrong guy the wrong token and suddenly you're spoken for by someone with a lazy eye and a drinking problem. Tokens were meant to be subtle. A glove pinned to your chest, a ribbon tied to your sword hilt. Everyone knew what it meant, and no one said what it meant. The more cryptic, the better. It was less about communication and more about plausible deniability. Oh, this glove? No, it's not from Lady Joan. It just appeared on my pillow, scented with lavender, completely random. For commoners, tokens were simpler. Maybe a wood carving, maybe a handkerchief you stitched when you weren't milking something. It was still romantic, just with more calluses involved. Tokens were also risky. Giving one to the wrong person could spark rumors. Receiving one you didn't want meant figuring out how to politely return someone's sock without insulting their lineage. But for all the awkwardness, these tokens carried real emotional weight. They were symbols of love in a world that didn't allow much room for it. So you finally build up the courage to talk to your crush. Maybe offer them a flower. Maybe quote a little bad poetry you definitely didn't steal from a traveling minstrel. You're ready for a moment of intimacy. Unfortunately, you're not alone. Welcome to the world of medieval dating surveillance, where love is never blind. It's heavily monitored by your mother, your priest, a nosy cousin, and sometimes all three at once. Let's say you're a young woman of marrying age. You're never just going for a walk. You're going for a walk with Margaret and her terrifyingly strict aunt, who's already judging your posture. Even if you're simply fetching water, someone is watching. Someone is always watching. It's less dating, more espionage. And if you're a man trying to court someone, better hope you have the approval of her family, her parish priest, and the local gossip network. You show up at her house with flowers? Her father's behind the door sharpening something. Her mother's pretending to stir a pot that hasn't boiled in 3 hours. And the village priest just happens to be passing by on his way to morning prayers at sunset. The logic behind all this supervision was simple. Protect virtue, preserve family honor, and absolutely prevent any unsanctioned touching, especially before marriage, especially alone, especially ever. Chaperones were there to monitor innocent interactions, group outings, monitored, walks, supervised, sitting within a 2-meter radius of each other on a bench. Only if someone's grandmother is knitting nearby and pretending not to listen. The church, of course, had opinions, lots of them. It regulated courtship the way a bouncer regulates a nightclub. Priests gave sermons about proper conduct and wrote lengthy treatises on the dangers of flirtation. Yes, that's right. Medieval clergy published anti-flirting manuals. Imagine someone copying those out by candlelight while monks silently judge you from across the scriptorium. Even letter writing wasn't safe. Some monasteries opened love letters just to screen for moral content. That's right, divine censorship. So if you want to fall in love, you'll have to get used to doing it quietly and in the presence of your entire extended family and possibly God. So you're in love, or at least medieval in love, which is mostly longing, confusion, and a lot of pacing near windows. You've exchanged glances across a feast. Maybe they picked up your dropped handkerchief and didn't immediately throw it into the fire. The tension is unbearable, but you still can't speak freely. There are chaperones, priests, mothers lurking like emotional border patrol agents. So what do? You write a letter. Ah, yes, the secret love letter. The most dangerous piece of parchment since the excommunication notice. This is your chance to confess your heart, using the most cryptic, overly poetic language possible. Because you can't just say, I like you. You must say, my soul is a stag, pierced by the arrow of your grace, roaming the forests of yearning. Naturally, if you're literate, which, let's be honest, isn't a given, you pen your message on vellum or rough parchment. If you're really dedicated, you dust it with flower petals or perfume. Just be careful with that. One noble accidentally used a love letter to wrap a herring and delivered it to the wrong girl. They're married now. It's fine. Now comes the problem of delivery. You can't just hand it over. You need a courier, a loyal servant, a bribed monk, or a younger sibling with limited understanding of consequences. Sometimes even a minstrel would do the job, singing your poem in the town square while pretending it was anonymous. Subtle. And the poetry? Risky. Very risky. The line between romantic and heresy was thinner than a monk's patience during Lent. If your metaphor even hinted at anything physical, you might find yourself confessing to both lust and literary exaggeration. But despite all the rules, people did write. Some letters survived. Some poems were copied and passed around like forbidden fruit. In a world of rigid roles and constant supervision, a folded scrap of words could feel revolutionary. So you write, you risk it. You press your trembling hand to the parchment and say everything you can't say aloud. Just don't sign it too clearly. You want romance, not a church trial. Finally, a break, a feast day, a harvest festival, a maypole dance.